All right, well, I have 10:01, so we'll get started and jump right in. Just a couple of housekeeping things before I turn it over to President Carrie Danko. Please go ahead and unmute yourself if you're not speaking so that we eliminate any feedback. Happy to have this be a conversation, so feel free to unmute yourself when you want to ask a question or pop something in the chat. You can just directly message me or put it in the chat for all to see, and we'll make sure we get that answered. Before we start, I just want to let y'all know, we just posted to Facebook. If you are looking for your vaccine, real estate is part of the priority category 1C. I know in last week's call that I did, I had people update their record on the state site, but actually Mary Washington Healthcare is running a separate list for those priority groups. You are able right now, if you would like to get a vaccine immediately and not wait for that state call, because I don't know how long that's going to take, you can go and fill out the information through Mary Washington Healthcare. You just go to Facebook. There's a direct link on our page to Mary Washington's page. It's very simple. You fill it out. You check that 1C category, which includes real estate, and you will get an email within a few hours to schedule your vaccine, either for the same day or for the next day. That link is good through the end of June, but they're only scheduling out, I think, 36 to 48 hours. But the staff here did it, those of us who were not vaccinated, and we got in immediately. So it really is a quick turnaround for those of you who are waiting and don't want to wait anymore. Feel free to do that. With that, I will turn it over to President Carrie Danko.
Okay, thank you so much, Kim. So welcome and good morning to everyone else. So it's funny, when we named the title of today, the Market Madness, we were actually going with the theme of March Madness, just like we did for the rest of, for Marches for Members. But the name has proved to be extremely appropriate when describing today's market. So I know that we're all living in the reality of this crazy market, including me. And so I'm looking forward to this event. And like Kim said, we really do want it to be more of a conversation than a presentation. So feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions or pop some questions in the chat. So anyway, I'm sure that today's speaker needs no introduction because she's one of our favorites, and she's definitely one of my favorites. And I will probably be quoting her for days to come to my friends and family, as I've done in the past when I've heard her presentations, but I am going to introduce her anyway. So Dr. Lisa Sturtevant is the chief economist for the Virginia Realtors. But before she was their economist, she was our economist. She used to work for George Mason University and their Center for Regional Analysis and spent a lot of time working on housing data. She then opened her own company, Lisa Sturtevant and Associates, and FAR actually contracted with her to produce our often referenced 2017 regional housing studies. I'm also pleased that the Virginia Realtors recruited her to be our #1 data person, and her input has made a big impact on the tools that are available to all of us as realtors. You may know this, she produces a quarterly and monthly home sales report for many associations across the Commonwealth, including us, that is chock full of great data that we can use with our clients. If you haven't already seen that product, go to www.farmembers.com/market to see the most recent editions of both publications. So welcome, Lisa, and thank you for being here. And we're ready for you to tell us about our mad market and if you think we will see any relief in the upcoming months.
Carrie, thank you very much. Can you? Oh, there, perfect. Yes, I was hearing you in my own computer. Carrie, thank you very much. Kim, thank you very much. And thanks to all the FAR members on with us today. I love this March Madness theme. I think there is a lot of frenzied activity out there. There's a lot of, I think, uncertainty in some cases on where we might be headed. And so I thought today I would share some data, right? Because that's what I do, and sort of what I'm looking at. But as Carrie and Kim mentioned, I'd really love to hear more about what you all are seeing on the ground, whether what you're seeing sort of matches my data. You're ahead of my data. My data are old compared to what you guys are seeing on a day-to-day basis. And then also, like, if we could have a conversation about, what are the kinds of things we should be looking at to help us sort of forecast where we're headed, and what kinds of things should we be prepared to talk with our prospective buyers and sellers about as we go into 2021. So that's kind of what we'll do here. And I will make the slides available. So if anyone wants to peruse them at their leisure, they can. And but let's get started just on where we are on the economy. I'd like to start with the economy, the sort of big picture. It sort of gives us an idea of whether we're going in a sort of a positive direction or kind of a wait and see or a negative direction. The latest data on GDP is from the fourth quarter of 2020, the fourth quarter of last year. And as you know, GDP is sort of the best measure of the overall national economy. Usually GDP goes up every year, right? So usually the economy grows because the number of people increases, the number of people in the workforce, the number of businesses, those all tend to grow year over year. This chart shows the change in GDP from one year to the next. And as expected, most of the bars are positives, meaning we add to GDP at most years. In 2020, though, GDP was down 3.5% compared to 2019. And that's the biggest drop in GDP we've had since World War II, since the mid 40s. And so you can see, even during the Great Recession, where the economy shrunk, we had a pretty sharp downturn in 2020. And that's kind of where we were. We are gaining back for sure, but we're gaining back from a place that we really haven't been in a really long time. This shows where we are in Virginia, right? So this is similar. It's about jobs, and it shows in a given month how many jobs there are compared to the same month a year ago. And usually, like I said, we have more jobs than we would a year earlier. But last spring, as you all remember, I can't believe in some ways, I can't believe it's been a whole year. But a year ago, we ended up going into a very deep recession, and statewide we lost about 450,000 jobs, sort of 450,000 fewer jobs compared to a year earlier. And you can see we've been sort of steadily gaining back jobs. If you notice though, the bars are sort of they're not getting shorter, meaning the pace of job growth has slowed across the state. And so I think my message for this whole morning, I think is going to be, we should expect spring to be a little bit slower for several reasons. And one reason is the pace of job growth, as I mentioned, has slowed a little bit. It's likely to pick up now that vaccines are more widely available. That's fantastic news about Mary Washington Hospital Center. And as vaccines are more widely available, we will see job growth improve. But we had sort of seen a slowdown in that job growth. This is what it looked like in Northern Virginia. We can see again that just the line instead of bars, but the same idea, very sharp downturn in the number of jobs in Northern Virginia, a sharp increase in the middle of last year, but then sort of a slowdown in the job growth. And that's sort of where we are as we head into 2021. You can see that if you compare where we are now compared to a year ago, across the state, there are fewer jobs in every metro area compared to where there were a year ago. You can see Northern Virginia, for example, we have about 80,000 fewer jobs now than we did a year ago. And that's true, we're sort of down across the board. The thing that's really important to remember, and I'm sure I've said this before, is the downturn didn't hit all sectors of the economy the same. And that's one reason why the housing market sort of has been on fire this past year, is a lot of the sectors that are employing folks who are your prospective home buyers. A lot of those sectors weren't as adversely affected by the recession. So many professional technical services workers, folks who work for the federal government, a lot of these folks were able to sort of simply pick up their work and bring it home, and might even have seen their financial situations improve over COVID as their expenses were lower, but their incomes were maybe not impacted at all by the downturn. And so this really is a tale of two economies here as we've been going through this pandemic. And as we look at where the sectors are that have done better, you can see transportation, warehousing is one sector that is being fueled a lot by a lot of the online shopping that has been done in greater pace during COVID. But the professional and technical services sector, the federal government sector, these are two really important sectors to the Northern Virginia economy, two really important sectors to our home buying population. And those sectors have done fairly well over the pandemic and have really fueled the ability for people to get out into the home buying market. So when we talk about the fact that we have a long way to go to gain back the jobs that were lost, a lot of those gains are still going to need to happen in some of the sectors you see at the bottom of this chart. Leisure and hospitality, for example, restaurants, bars, hotels. That's where a lot of the job gains are still needing to come back. For the for sale market, though, that sector and some of those other sectors tend to have more workers who are renters rather than prospective home buyers or homeowners, simply because those sectors tend to have younger workers, tend to have workers with lower wages. And so they were not necessarily in the home buying market to begin with. And so that's one of the reasons why we saw such a rebound in the housing market, the for sale side of the housing market, was there was a pool of folks who were, kind of ready to buy and hadn't seen their financial situations really adversely affected. So speaking of the housing market, what does this all mean? And again, if you have thoughts or questions as we go along, please don't hesitate to put them in the chat, and then I'll shut the PowerPoint down and we can all chat, we can all talk and we can unmute ourselves. But so I'm just going to show some of the kind of standard trends. This is from 2016 to the present, and the latest data we have are for February. The March home sales numbers will be out around the 15th of April. And what this shows is the number of home sales statewide compared to the same month a year ago. So this is the way we track this stuff. And look what happened, right? If you look at the right-hand side of this chart, you can see back in April, May, we had a really sharp decline in home sales activity, right? No surprise, we were staying at home. The governor's stay-at-home directive was put into place. There were lots of uncertainty, a lot of concerns. And so the number of home sales declined pretty dramatically in May. But look what happened. Home sales activity really surged in the second half of 2020 statewide. And we expected that those spring sales that we sort of lost, we expected those to get pushed into the summer. But I don't think let me just speak for myself, I didn't expect this really ramped up acceleration of home buying activity. And a big driver of that, as you all know, has been these historically low mortgage rates that people have been eager to take advantage of. At the same time, prospective home buyers are spending a lot more time in their homes, and they're sort of looking around at their four walls and sort of figuring out if there's a move they could make that would be a better fit for them and for their family. And so we saw really strong home sales activity throughout the fall and really even through the winter. Home sales were up 30% in November, December statewide. In February, compared to a year ago, the number of home sales statewide in Virginia was up 19.2% compared to a year ago. So we saw a really unusual winter market. And we saw the same thing in the Fredericksburg area. So this is the data for the Fredericksburg Association footprint. And you can see a similar decline back in May. The market in Fredericksburg really rebounded back much faster than many other markets across the Commonwealth, but really steady sales activity. And you can see in February, the number of home sales kind of region-wide were up 12.5% compared to a year earlier. And this, you can see that the home sales activity is still really strong, not quite as strong as what we saw back in November and December. And that is entirely being driven by a lack of inventory as opposed to some slowdown in demand. We're going to talk more about that inventory because that's really the story in our market right now. So speaking of which, this is inventory, and this is statewide, the number of active listings on the market compared to the same month a year ago. At the end of February, Kim knows I do this all the time. I see a number that surprises me. I want to go and check and make sure that it's right, because I'm not surprised very often, I guess, or I like to think I can expect things. But at the end of February, there was a total of 15,700 active listings on the market in all 17 MLSs across all 28 local associations across the entire state, 15,700 active listings. And to put that into perspective, we have 35,000 Virginia Realtors members. We have 3.2 million households, and we have about 2 million homeowners in the state of Virginia, and we have people coming to the state every day. So inventory is not an exaggeration to say that it is sort of an epic shortage. And in February, statewide, the number of active listings was down 43.7% compared to February of 2020. But we're down to about a third compared to where we were 5 years ago. So if you had a home buyer out 5 years ago looking to buy a home, they would have found 3 times as many properties as they are finding now as they go out of the market. And one thing Kim and I were talking about, and one thing I'll talk a little bit about here, is I think these numbers actually even overstate the level of available inventory. There's just some of the characteristics of the market suggest that the homes that are available on the inventory are really challenging to sell. So if we look at the Fredericksburg market, Fredericksburg has been one of the tightest markets in terms of available inventory throughout the pandemic, right? And so you can see in February of 2021, active listings was down 63.7% compared to just 1 year ago. And the number of active listings has been down really dramatically over this is sort of month end active listings, right? And there's 2 reasons, there's 2 parts to this inventory, right? The first is we see a shrinking in the number of active listings because we see a slowdown in sellers, in people listing their home. And we've certainly been seeing that. We've actually been seeing that for quite some time. We've been seeing a slowdown in the number of folks listing their homes, primarily over the last few years for demographic reasons. We have a larger population of folks in their 50s and 60s, baby boomers who are staying in their homes longer. We can see the average length of time people are staying in their homes has increased. And just that fact alone has led to some of this decline we saw back a few years ago. Then in 2020, during COVID, we saw people hesitant to put their house on the market because of concerns about the public health risk. We also know that people are concerned about putting their house on the market because they don't know where they will move. So that's sort of the second supply side issue is new construction, while it's started to increase, hasn't been sufficient to keep up with demand. But there are also during COVID, the sort of the demand side of the reasons why inventory is shrinking so fast is if we're comparing the number of listings available at the end of the month and they're being snatched up as quickly as they're listed, this sort of increase in demand, increase in the number of buyers in the market has drawn down the inventory much faster than we had been seeing in years past. So if we look a little bit closer, we can see on the left, this is for the Fredericksburg area, and we measure months of supply by taking, there's a lot of different ways to do it, but this is sort of looking at the available inventory and kind of assuming the pace of sales activity would be the same as it was over the last year or so. How many months would it take to draw down the existing inventory if no new listings came on? And in 2021, in February, according to the data that I'm tracking, and I think it's probably similar to what you would find if you look in Bright, is there's less than a month's supply of inventory in the Fredericksburg area market. And you can see that it's sort of bumped around a little bit in February's past, but I think Fredericksburg is a little bit unique. There's a few other markets like this, but there's 2020 has been COVID, and 2020 has had a dramatic impact on the market. And you can see that in the change in months of supply. You can see that over on the right in the average days on market, and where back in 2020 in February, homes were on the market an average of 58 days. But according to the data I pull, homes are on the market for an average of 20 days. And we think that's even overstated. And it is an average, right? So if there's a few homes that are on the market for a really long time, it kind of pulls that average up. But there's been a really dramatic change in the market. And so as questions have come in, Kim McClellan mentioned that the last time we had a balanced market where we usually think of balance being about 5 months of supply, was back in September 2015. And absolutely, I think we're actually going to have to, I think, rethink what we mean by balance, just given different demographic characteristics. But for sure, we have been outside of sort of a normal balance for a really long time. And all of the data for Fredericksburg are for the Fredericksburg Area Association of Realtors footprint. So it's the city as well as the surrounding counties. So to the question that came in. And I do have information for the city and for each individual county available. If you have questions, I can pull that stuff up. But generally, the patterns we're seeing is sort of happening everywhere. So there's a lot on this slide. So I'm going to pull out just something for Spotsylvania County, and then we'll go back and look at this crazy slide. But I wanted to do kind of a deep dive into what the inventory looked like. So if we look at Spotsylvania County, according to the data that I have that we get via a feed from Bright and from any other MLS that has Spotsylvania County properties listed, there were 144 active listings at the end of February in Spotsy, and that's down 209 compared to just a year ago. So a year ago, there was over 350 active listings. That's about 5.59 months of supply. So here's what I was trying to figure out. So the median list price for the inventory, like if you were to go and look at those 144 active listings in Spotsylvania County, the median list price is over $500,000 for the homes that are currently available. The sales price, though, is much lower. So meaning what's being bought is a little bit different than what remains on the inventory. So in Spotsylvania County anyway, the inventory skews a little bit towards higher end properties, more expensive properties, maybe more properties with more land, because homes are selling in Spotsylvania County for an average of $348,000. The other interesting thing, and this is true across the board, is while homes that are selling now are selling very quickly in 20 days, but really in a lot less time, the inventory includes homes that have been on the market a really long time. And without me being able to go in and look at individual properties, that suggests to me that there's properties on the inventory that are, for lack of a better word, are sort of challenging to sell for, and you guys know probably properties like that. So I think that's why one reason why the inventory numbers are actually a little bit overstated in some ways, that there's some properties that are just probably not going to sell on the inventory because they've been there a long time. If you go back and look, that average DOM, that's average days on market of the homes that are currently listed for sale in these jurisdictions, you can see in the city of Fredericksburg, for example, there's only 30 active listings, which is down, from 60 a year ago. And the homes that are available for sale on average have been on the market for 136 days. So they've been on the market a long time. And they tend to be the higher priced homes. So there's a lot sort of to unpack here, but I guess we can't overstate how challenging the inventory is. And hopefully as we sort of talk, we can talk about what some of the solutions might be for adding to the inventory, but this is sort of, what we're facing going into 2021. So as you all know, home buyers are facing this sort of frenzied market, this market madness. They are, competing with many other buyers for fewer and fewer homes. And so last week, we put out a survey to Virginia Realtors members, and we had over 1,000 realtors reply to the survey, which was awesome. I was really happy to see that. And we asked a few questions about sort of what's going on in the market. And the first question we asked were about compromises home buyers were starting to make in their home search. And there's a lot of realtors who are saying that buyers are definitely looking outside their preferred neighborhoods. For example, 44.5% of Virginia realtors say it is very common that buyers are looking outside their preferred neighborhoods. Another 43% say it's somewhat common. But it's interesting to me that more than 1 out of 4 realtors, so 28% of realtors say that it has become very common that home buyers are deciding to put off buying a home altogether. This is the second indication that I think we're going to expect home sales activity to slow a little bit in March. There are a huge pool, a growing pool of discouraged buyers who are going to decide, even though rates are still low, and even though their financial situations might be good, even though they want to buy a home, they may just decide to put it off because the inventory is so limited. And so there are other other compromises that home buyers are making. Some are looking to buy a new home. That's challenging for a lot of other reasons and similar reasons too, but maybe settling for a smaller home. Very few buyers at this point appear to be sort of settling for a townhome or condo when they'd really like a single family home. So there might be more movement on that product type, but right now, it looks like there's a growing number of buyers deciding to just wait. And then again, this is the stuff that you guys see every day and would love to, hear what you're seeing, but we know that buyers are having to make concessions and in some cases be really creative to improve their chances of making a successful offer. And according to our survey of Virginia realtors, nearly all realtors say that buyers are offering over list price or they're including escalation clauses in their offers in order to make their offer competitive. But there's a number of other things that buyers are doing, and a lot of them involve waiving inspections and contingencies. So more than, nearly 90% of Virginia realtors say it's either very common or somewhat common for buyers to waive the home inspection, which, we sort of think about that. Someone going in and, facing this tight market and going in without a home inspection and what that might mean. Some are, increasing the earnest money deposit to make their offer more attractive, waiving the sale of home contingency, offering a shorter loan contingency timeline, waiving the appraisal, or making the appraisal or adding in their offer the agreeing to pay a certain dollar amount or a certain percentage over the appraised value. So these are all the ways that, as you all know, buyers are operating in this crazy market, which is, and the other one that didn't show up here is making all cash offers and making that your the way to make your offer really competitive. And, there's a comment in the chat about that waiving appraisals, that it's kind of a scary situation. I think it is. I think we're in a period where we're pushing up against a situation where homes are being sold at values that aren't going to fall, but it's going to be hard to hold them firm if someone was going to have to resell their home in a short amount of time. The other issue about waiving appraisals that becoming common, as many of you know, working with VA buyers, is they don't have the option to buy over appraised value. They need to have that appraisal as part of their offer. And so a lot of VA and certainly FHA buyers are not able to compete in that, with that kind of concession. So it's really March madness, market madness is surely what's the description should be. So you put all that together, right? And so we've seen, pretty strong price growth. The median sales price in February in Virginia statewide was $320,000. That's up 9.6% compared to a year ago. But we had 6 months where home prices were up at double-digit rates over the fall, which is really sort of, and to the issue of appraisals is sort of, there's a sense that in some markets, there's less of a relationship between sort of what the appraised value would be and what people are offering. But this is not like 2004, 5, 6, right? There is a shortage of this good, right, that people want, these homes. There is a abundance of demand, and there is just sort of this idea that as people are able to bid prices up for a product that's in limited supply, that's what we're seeing. There are a few things that could start to put a little bit of a softening in the price growth. And I think that would actually be good for the market, good for buyers, and still good for sellers. And if interest rates tick up again, then we could expect that price growth could soften a little bit. But there's really no reason to think prices are going to fall. But I do think we should expect over the coming year, if demand slows just a bit, that price growth will be a little bit less like fierce. And in fact, that at the end of the day, it could help us move back to that normal market that sort of Kim mentioned. In the Fredericksburg area, you guys know this, home prices have been up really dramatically over the last really few years, but in 2020 and into 2021, and in February, for that whole region, the whole Fredericksburg area region, the median sales price was up 13.1% in February compared to a year ago. So before we talk about what 2021 is what we think it might look like, and then we have a little conversation about what everybody's seeing, there's some ways that COVID has really changed the housing market, and it sort of impacts those of you in the industry, it impacts sellers, it impacts potential buyers. And they really are in some ways unique to the situation we've been in over the last year. The first is really the housing market, and particularly the for sale side of the market has really been the driver of the economy. And this is one of the things at Virginia Realtors that we're making sure that state legislators know, that as the economy has been weak last year and has begun to recover, that the residential real estate market has really been a key push and a key support to economic growth. And so we want to make sure that the residential real estate industry and the real estate industry at large has the support of legislators in Richmond, because it's really been a linchpin of the recovery. Mortgage rates fell to historically low levels. In fact, we hit historic low levels 15 times in 2020 as a result of actions by the Federal Reserve and some other actions on the part of the federal government to keep interest rates low and then keep the rate to borrow in the mortgage market very low. Home equity has surged. At the end of 2020, the amount of home equity that existing homeowners held reached a record level, something like, I'm going to get the number wrong, I think it's $7.2 trillion nationally that we hold now in housing equity. And unlike in the last recession, where people were using a lot of their housing equity to spend for other things, there hasn't been as much sort of using your house as an ATM kind of activity, but rather people are feeling more comfortable that they have a cushion in their homes because of this rising equity. I think we should expect the seasonality of the housing market to be sort of a little crazy over 2021. We had all that spring activity move to the summer. We had a bananas, winter market. And I think we'll see, when we would normally expect the spring market to be busier, I think we're going to see it to a little bit slower than it has been in sort of, past springs, not last spring, but past springs, simply because of the supply constraints. Home buyers are reevaluating their preferences, sort of what's important. Space is increasingly important, high-speed internet access, home offices, places for kids to do schoolwork, outdoor space. Those are things we all saw have become more important. And then finally, there's just this epic housing shortage. So what should we expect in 2021? And instead of sort of telling you what I think we're going to expect, I thought it was interesting to sort of think through what are some of the things that are in and out. So you guys have seen those lists, those in and out lists, what's out for 2021, what's in. So I think what we'll see in 2021, we know that the work from home trend was a huge part of COVID in 2020. And it is expected that people are going to begin to go back into the office. And so while there was a sense that if people thought they could work from home 100% of the time, then maybe people could live, anywhere, provided there was reliable high-speed internet access. But I think what we're hearing from surveys of employers as well as workers is that people are still going to want to go into the office. They may want to have the flexibility to work from home, but being able to get into the office, 1 or 2 days a week is still going to be important. I think this is one of the reasons why we've seen markets like Charlottesville, for example, and Harrisonburg be some of the fastest markets in Virginia. Is we've seen and heard anecdotally from realtors that they've got more and more buyers from Northern Virginia, bringing their sort of Northern Virginia incomes down to markets where home prices are a little bit lower, really driving up home values. And, because you can get to DC or to Tyson's once a week without too much trouble from those locations. And that will probably continue. We saw in the second half of 2020, we saw home sales up across the state, really, but we did see demand increase in some of the rural markets. So the darker blue colors are where home sales activity was up more strongly. Blue was more strongly. And you can see markets like the Eastern Shore, the Northern Neck, Middle Peninsula was really strong. The parts of Southern Virginia and Southeast Virginia were really strong. And we've also seen that in terms of prices. The median sales price in rural counties in Virginia was up 20% in the second half of 2020, while in urban and suburban counties, there was definitely firm price growth, but it was a little bit lower than we saw in some of the rural areas. And we know that markets that have, again, that reliable broadband have done better. And we know that some of the sales activity is a result of an uptick in the purchase of second homes. But some of this is also people making a choice as the way we work has changed because of COVID. In our January survey of our members, we asked, what buyers were looking for. And there was definitely an increase in people looking for home offices, high-speed internet, and outdoor space. And then, a decline in interest in condominiums. And it's interesting, the inventory challenge that we talked about is true everywhere, except for the condominium market in close-in Northern Virginia. We've seen the number of condos available for sale in Arlington, Alexandria, and Fairfax up 100%, 200%, 400% in Arlington compared to a year ago. And so there's the demand for condominiums has really fallen off a cliff here during COVID. I think in 2021, we'll see buyers who have been frustrated just decide to remain renters for a little while. And we can see that in some of the pending sales data. So this pending sales data are the number of homes that went under contract at the end, but by the end of the month hadn't closed. So there's sort of an indication of what the closed sales will be in March and April. And in February, statewide, pending sales had been up, compared to a year ago, all fall and into the winter, really strongly. In February, the number of pending sales was down 2.3% compared to a year ago, which is sort of foreshadowing a little bit that we may see a slowdown. The pending sales numbers were down even more in the Fredericksburg area market, where the number of pending sales in February was down 12.1% compared to a year ago. Look at those bars, up 30, 40, almost 50% in the fall. And so that's sort of one of the indications of a slight slowdown in closed home sales activity. And the major problem is really inventory, but there are some signs that we might see a little bit of slack come back into the inventory. So instead of extremely low inventory, maybe just very low inventory. We see that new listings statewide started to ramp back up. And so in fact, in December, the number of new listings, homes coming to the market for the first time, was up 25.5% compared to the December of the prior year, because the winter was all unusual. And so that was hopeful that we might see inventory start to climb. Although in February, as you can see, the number of new listings in February is down compared to a year ago. And we saw a similar trend in the Fredericksburg area market, where the number of new listings was down. I don't have new construction data here, but that's the other place that the supply will need to increase. And we've seen an uptick in new construction, but as I mentioned, it has been far below what's needed to meet demand. And then lastly, we'll talk about mortgage rates, because I'm sure it's on everybody's mind. For 3 weeks in a row, I guess, we've gotten data from Freddie Mac and other places, but I get my data from Freddie Mac on mortgage rates. And mortgage rates have been at 3% or below for a really long time. We kept hitting historic lows last summer, and every time we hit a new low, there was a new story about it. But we sort of have gotten used to 3% mortgage rates, and people sort of have begun to expect them. So then when we see something like this, people start to get alarmed. And I don't know that the media helps, but we have indeed seen the average 30-year fixed rate mortgage rate increase for the last 3 weeks. At the end of March, like last week, I guess, the average was 3.17, according to Freddie Mac. And it is a sign that the market is feeling more comfortable, that the economy is on an upward trajectory. There is reason to believe that refinance activity has begun to slow, and so rates could rise as demand on the refi side has slowed down a little bit. I think we're going to see this bump around a little bit, but it seems likely to me, and I try and read other smart people smarter than I about this, that rates are likely to stabilize or even decline a little bit. And we should expect the 30-year rate to remain in the low threes in 2021. Now, mortgage rates will rise. And I think some people eventually, and I think there's some people who are concerned about what might happen to the market. So I did my last slide, and then I'll turn my PowerPoint off. But you can see this is national data. And what we have on the right-hand side in that red line, that's the average 30-year fixed rate mortgage rate. The blue line is monthly home sales. And this is, again, at the national level. So you can see they sort of both bump up and down. There's a little bit hard to see if there's a pattern between them, whether they move at the same time. But I wanted to add these two lines. So the bottom line is mortgage rates at 4%, and then the top line is mortgage rates at 6%. So if you follow the blue line, right, that's home sales, you can see that whether rates are 6% or whether rates are 4%, we still have pretty good home sales activity at the national level and at the state level too. And as those of you who have worked in the business for a really long time know that, we have some home sales activity when mortgage rates are 9, 10, 12, 18%. I think what's going to be interesting for realtors and for the real estate industry next year, and as we go through, is sort of talking to prospective buyers about expectations and about what mortgage rates will be, because there will come a time where the rates aren't going to be at 2.65%, but rather closer to 4%. And that's probably 2022, but it's still a conversation, that folks are going to have to think about starting to have. But as those rates rise a little bit, we do expect that will soften demand just a bit. It's not going to have a major impact on someone who's ready and can find a home they want to purchase. But over time, that I believe will help put a little bit of downward pressure on that price growth, so we won't see the double-digit price growth towards the end of the year, and it might help everyone sort of take a breath a little bit and get back to where things feel a little bit less frenzied, a little less mad, and maybe a little bit more normal. I'm going to turn my PowerPoint off and turn it back over to Carrie and Kim and you all, and see what kind of conversation we want to have. As always, though, if you need anything or have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. You can reach me by email or on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, all those. And then we have a new research section of Virginia Realtors website where we put our statewide home sales reports, as well as a lot of local data, county, city data on and metro area data on jobs in the housing market. We also have some new reports up there, so check it out if you have a chance. But I talked a little bit longer than I meant to, but I do hope that folks can stick around and make comments or ask questions. So Kim and Carrie, I will turn it back over to you all.
Yeah, Lisa, that was great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
You all know that I'll talk, so I will wait and see if there's any questions from agents on the call before I dominate. Well, don't be shy to pipe in. So Lisa, I did want to ask about the pending sales thing. So when we were looking at February, I think that there's some thought, if this was a normal year, we would say, the weather had something to do with it, that we had some really crummy weather in February. Does that, for you, that does not account for the drop that we saw? This is the fact that we have frustrated buyers who are not able to find what they're looking for.
I think so. I mean, I think if we were Texas, right, and we had massive power outages and or we were the Northeast and we had snowstorms that shut us down, I don't think so. Because it's not just Northern Virginia that we saw this dip in February, right? It's places where the weather ended up being relatively typical in February. That's a good point, though, and we shouldn't forget that, that there are outside factors. I'm always looking for what can we draw on to help us think through what 2 months down the road might look like. And when I put the pending sales number together with other things we're hearing, I think it's foreshadowing a little bit of a slower market.
Okay.
Not that what people want to hear necessarily, but
I don't have a question, but I guess it's more of a comment just about
please.
realtors and kind of, you're saying to set the buyers and sellers expectations, but I think our expectations, we have to kind of check ourselves a little bit too, because I think we get so used to a market being a certain way and we forget that things change within moments in our market. And so, as we're seeing this slowdown, certainly as we're meeting with our sellers, I'm finding just that little bit of like I don't want to say how much of a seller's market it's been to set them up for unrealistic expectations where they're hearing about the 10, 20 offers and maybe they only get 2, which I think is just, so I just, I think I think the next month is going to be interesting because I do feel a little bit of a slowdown and I think I'm just a little bit, I want to make sure that I'm setting realistic expectations for my buyers and sellers. And so I think the next month will be telling as to what we're going to be looking at for the rest of the year.
Yeah. And I really appreciate you saying that. And, I've been looking at data for a long time, but this past year has been the first, my experience really of getting to know the realtor profession and understanding the professionalism that comes with being a realtor. I feel like this is in this changing market, I think this is where like you all, shine in terms of your professionalism and talking with people about expectations, like you say, and being honest with people who are making decisions in the heat of the moment about appraisals or home inspections or other contingencies and being really, I think, being a valuable voice in this frenzied market is more important than ever, I think. And also, as we know that more and more people are being sort of left out of the market because of the chaos, sort of just, being available to help folks think through options and kind of, help them kind of find the home that they're looking for. Even if they might not be like the top of the line buyer, right? Because it's hard for everyone, but it's become harder for those first-time buyers who are using those VA and FH loans. African-American and Hispanic home buyers have faced a harder time in this market. So as we are here entering Fair Housing Month, that's also another good thing to keep in mind for us as folks in the realtor profession.
Lisa, do you have any data or anecdotal evidence about sales price, list price, sales price versus appraised value?
Well, that's a good question. Yeah, I only have anecdotal evidence about more and more offers coming in where the buyer is offering to pay above appraised value. So they might not be waiving the appraisal, but they are putting a clause in, I'm using the wrong words, I know, but that they're willing to pay more than what the appraisal comes in on. I think this is, it's challenging because the market is moving so quickly. And so, as you know, sometimes appraisals can't keep up with where the true supply and demand is. But I think there are just as many cases of people who are frustrated and just want to get into a home where they are probably offering a price that is above certainly appraisal. And it's not, again, I'm not trying to raise alarms, but I think people should be aware that if you're offering over appraised value, that, this should be a place you're planning to live for a while. That if you were trying to look to turn this home around in a year or two, things might be a little bit softer when rates are at 4% and when things have calmed down a little bit. And so you might have found that you overpaid over the long haul, though, unless new construction ramps up significantly in the next couple of years, demand is always going to outpace the supply. So that's not really an answer to your question. What I do know is that this is an interesting statistic, at least in my opinion. We track the average sold to list price ratio, right? And in a market like Fredericksburg, that could be over 100%, where on average, sellers are getting above list price. For the first time, the statewide average sold to list price ratio was above 100%. So meaning across the state, on average, homes were selling for more than list. Now that moves around, right? Because sellers then and work with their realtors and get more educated, and then they, raise the list price. But I feel like that was the first time we saw that. So there's definitely indications of that price pressure.
Lisa, I wanted to ask about your crystal ball for median price. So I talk to elected officials a lot, and there's always been a concern the last few months about prices overheating too much.
Mm-hmm.
And when I look at the 2020 numbers, yes, prices went up about 10%, but our units sold went up 20%. Right. So a lot of that huge dollar volume increase was driven by just the number of homes we sold. Not that 10% is a modest increase, but I thought it was going to be higher. Uh-huh. So what do you think that will look like at the end of 2021? Do you think we'll see a moderation on price increases? Because it seems like, just hearing anecdotal stories, people are saying, well, my neighbor got $350. Why not put it up for $400? We can probably get that. There seems to be a quick escalation of those listing prices. Can people actually get that? And when will buyers say, no, this is not worth it?
Yep. I think we're getting close, Kim. I think we're getting close to that point. I think we're going to see for 2021, I think we're not going to see an average double-digit price appreciation for 2021. That's my projection. I think if we were to look at the first, quarter, maybe the first half of 2021, we'll still see the effects of that price growth. But what we're bumping up against is, in some ways, we're running out of buyers who can afford, right, those prices. At some point, you're going to have to see the sort of price growth moderate, simply because, as you suggest, people either don't want to or can't. And so if I were asked by a local official, I would say that, home prices are reflecting these underlying fundamentals of too little supply and very strong demand, because the region's an attractive place to be and the job market has been good. We expect that prices will continue to increase in 2021, but that pace of price growth is likely to slow down, simply because of affordability challenges as buyers are finding it harder to make offers at those higher prices.
Okay, any last questions for Lisa? I know we're coming up on 11. I had one question just about supply. It seems like, Carrie and I went on the radio last week and talked about how, and this is not just a COVID phenomenon, our low supply. This started much before now. But what will it take to get us back to a point where we do have a more balanced, healthy market? It seems to me that it's not just all of a sudden 2,000 people put their house in the market. It's not just that, but our pace of construction on new construction is pretty, I don't want to say low, but we actually built less houses in Stafford County in 2020 than we did in 2019.
That's interesting.
And there's a lot of focus on multifamily. I know all you realtors who drive around, the Route 1 corridor blows me away when I drive down to Cosner's Corner. There's so many apartments. But our builders are really constrained with supply, cost, availability of workforce. So I don't see us building our way out of this either. So where do you see that going on the supply side?
Well, right. So I wish I had better, more optimistic news. I think it's in the short term, it's going to continue to be tight. The new supply side has to be a really important part of it. But I don't know that we're going to see it in markets maybe where it's needed the most or most in demand. In fact, in 2020, we saw a lot more new single family construction outside of our metropolitan areas, in more rural areas where land is more easily available, where maybe opposition to new housing isn't quite as strong or organized. And I think that's sort of what you're seeing. I think I think we will see a little bit of new inventory from people who were reticent to list their homes for sale during the pandemic. And I think we'll see a little bit. I don't think it's going to make a huge difference. It's not going to like reverse those trends, Kim, that you mentioned that have been going on for a while. The only thing that's going to reverse those trends is time. I hate to be the Debbie Downer, but like the demographics are such that as folks get older, they're staying in their homes longer, and we all are going to leave this earth at some point. And again, I'm being really down the road and really sort of dark, but we are in a sort of demographically driven housing shortage. And unless Fredericksburg in the Washington area becomes a very, very unattractive place to be for some reason, and I just don't see that happening, because for lots of reasons, which we could talk about. I think the inventory challenge is going to be with us for a while. And the best answer in the short term is to figure out how to get more new homes built in places where it makes sense to get new homes built.
Yeah, thank you. Okay.
I wish that was better news. Like, I don't,
No,
and
I know.
again, I'm waiting for,
Realistic.
if someone has the magic bullet, please tell me, because then everyone would invite me to speak if I could say what the magic bullet is for the inventory.
Yeah.
I can't see it.
Well, I know you had asked me, and we did a poll a couple weeks ago for one of our events, where are these people moving from? So all the houses that our agents are selling, and it seems like a lot of them are local moves, that they're not necessarily coming, the bulk of them are not coming from out of state. So agents, if you have different experiences, please let me know, but people are just moving from within the region. Certainly Northern Virginia has always been a driver for down here, but people are moving from within Virginia.
We saw, and we did our February survey of Virginia realtors, and 35% of buyers in the first part of the year were moving within the same county or city. And when I looked back at census data from 2 years ago, the same share. And then about a quarter are moving in from out of state. And then Kim, to your point about, the rest are sort of moving from other parts of Virginia. So it wasn't as dramatically different as I expected either. I expected us to see, we heard anecdotally about New Yorkers moving into Charlottesville and like people from California moving down to Winchester, and we not showing up.
All those Yankees invading.
Hey, watch that now. Some of us are.
I'm from Connecticut, so I'm a Yankee that is already invaded. All right. Well, any final thoughts, questions from anybody on the call? This is always great data. And as we said, we put out information from Lisa every single month and then quarter. So please feel free to go in there and mine that data, share those graphs, share those things with your clients. We put them out there and she does it for us so that y'all have that kind of information to share on your feeds and with your clients. So thank you, everyone. This is being recorded. So if anybody in your office missed it, we will make sure to put that link out there. You all are free to go. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you to Lisa. We always enjoy having you down here. And thanks to all the attendees. I appreciate your coming out today.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.